everyone, welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're doing another indie horror spotlight. Today I have with us, he's a filmmaker, and he has a film that's right now on the festival circuit, and it's called In the Flesh. I have with us Connor Doyle. Connor, welcome to the Horror Room.
Thank you so much for having me, Travis. It's a pleasure being here.
It's a pleasure having you on, man. It's a pleasure having you on. Now, I've seen the trailer to In the Flesh. By the way, I'm going to be doing a review on In the Flesh, too, in the next couple of weeks. But tell my guests a little bit about it.
Of course. Well, In the Flesh is a 43-minute psychological thriller delving into themes of grief, loss, and also like the dangerous consequences of transference. Basically, the film follows our protagonist, Ted Lansky, who's one day kidnapped by a man named Jeremy while he was getting off of being called in the middle of the night to his office. And Jeremy kidnaps him and forces Ted to play act his dead brother, David, who had died from terminal cancer years ago. And after Ted masters the role, gradually, learns to gain Jeremy's confidence, he begins to learn the real reasons why he's there, and he, without giving too much away, he realizes he has to make a plan to escape, to avoid the horrific consequences of what's actually going on. But yeah, it's a 43-minute film, so short, featurette length. Shot in the Chicagoland area, so Chicago suburbs, Wheaton, Glen Ellen. And it's been, I want to say, like an 18-month process from pre-production, production, post-production, and finally we do have a finished film that we're currently in the middle of screening, getting through the festival circuit. But yeah, I would say the project started, it's been several years in the making, writing the script. After getting out of college, I kind of had this a small idea for a thriller. I wasn't too sure what it would be. Just wanted something to be kind of on a smaller scale, concentrated on its central characters. But I did want to delve into. I wasn't too sure I was going to be ready for that project immediately, so I was working on several other pieces and working on another script. I was storyboarding and getting ready to start shooting, and lo and behold, the COVID pandemic happens, and it's put a wrench completely in those plans. So I was out of work for a while, stuck at home, and I basically kind of had nothing to do. So kind of within that limited mindset, I was just trying to think of what would be a good project, very small scale, something don't have to worry about too big of a budget, something I could shoot in my house potentially because I couldn't shoot it anywhere else. So then again, that thriller idea kind of came back into mind. And I'm a huge fan of psychological horror, just in terms of how it gives an opportunity to kind of dive deep into social and psychological themes about family dynamics, while also having fun, of course. And it was also a really interesting time too, just because mid-2010s, there was a really great resurgence of kind of more thematically minded horror and thrillers, films of Jordan Peele. Yeah, clever horror, exactly. Mm-hmm. So films of Jordan Peele, Ari Aster, Robert David Mitchell's It Follows, and Robert Eggers. their films kind of really inspired me to kind of do something similar, in a way, just kind of going back into almost like a kidnapped thriller. I guess the original idea for In the Flesh was it would still be like a kidnapped thriller, but it would have been one person kidnaps another and forces them to kind of become part of this. I forget the name of the film, but basically kind of a conformist community in the suburbs and force them to be like a typical like piece of that community. It just
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of
like a
it,
robot.
but yes, I'm talking about.
Yeah, like a human robot. But yeah, that just kind of wasn't working, and I was kind of a little bit more interested in like the relationship between the captor and the captive. And another thing that was kind of coming up into mind were like true crime horror story, like true crime stories about like kidnappings and like women being forced to be like their captors' wives, and also kind of forced family dynamics, like the Turrell case, and like stories about like kids kind of forced to maintain this role in order to like show the family having some semblance of normalcy when it really is not. So with that in mind, yeah, and just with the idea of things being completely minimal, like minimal crew, minimal cast, it could really just be like two characters and maybe me playing like an off-screen character or something like that. The screenplay kind of started unfolding, and the process has kind of been an off and on project through the years. A lot of it was kind of put on the back burner while I was working on other things, kind of getting my life back on track after COVID, like after the lockdowns were like lifted. And it just kind of, that lasted for, I want to say like a good 2 to 3 years. And then it just kind of came to a point where I was about to turn 30. I hadn't made a film like this in like 6 years since college. And it was just kind of like a matter of, if I'm going to call myself a filmmaker, I've got to like crack at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of actually doing the action. And now, yeah, at that point, I returned to In the Flesh. I didn't even have a title for it. I did have characters. I had a basic framework of how things were going to develop. I had a terrible ending, which I'm grateful to that I abandoned. But I guess what was kind of the harder thing about finishing the project was kind of understanding the characters, kind of like trying to think of how is this realistic. Right from the onset, I knew I wanted this to be kind of more emotionally gripping. A lot of the film has to do with loss, trying to deal with like the grief of a lost loved one. That's what like Jeremy, the kidnapper, is trying to go through and trying to like sort out. But I guess the process of writing the characters kind of helped, in a way, trying to figure them out. As a screenwriter, one thing I've always kind of had a bit of like an issue with, or it's like an ongoing issue with screenwriters, is trying to like map out real characters, trying to find them,
Yeah.
without like making copies of your own psyche or like your own life or personality. And yeah, I mean, that's been like a constant struggle for me. And like one of my earliest memories for like in college that kind of stands out when thinking about characters is kind of thinking about what they want. Then like when I was taught that to begin with, I was kind of puzzled by it, just because if like drama is the relationship between like characters and characters, and if people are just driven by what they want, are they inherently selfish? But I think it has more to do with what characters like want from other people or want them to do or want from like the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be from like directly individual characters. But I guess that is like thinking about that, that's more of a more direct issue of actors and directors too. Just in terms of like, as a director, you have to think about how to accurately portray a character, like what aspects of them you want to see and like portray on the screen. And as an actor, you have to think about how to like properly embody a character, and that has to do with understanding the character. And just thinking about how the Ted and Jeremy are all more or less kind of filmmakers in their own way. There's a part in the film where Jeremy is instructing Ted through videotape, like old family videotapes of David, and instructing him how to react, how to perform his specific actions, his specific affect. Where am I going with this? But yeah, in a way, the characters, a lot of the drama has to do with the characters understanding David. Definitely has to do with Ted trying to like look past himself and in order to properly portray David, of course, for his own safety and his own livelihood, because he knows if he doesn't, he's gonna die. And for yeah, it goes there. And then Jeremy is also trying to figure out how to properly tell this random stranger who's never met David, doesn't know who David is or what his life is, how to accurately portray that. And that kind of delves into him kind of expressing some truths in a way. So I was just kind of interested in exploring these themes while still having this kind of thriller aspect to it, kind of keeping the audience on the edge of their seat, while still kind of understanding the emotional turmoil that they're going through. And then, like, yeah, after that realization, it just became like much easier to write. And then, yeah, after a certain point, I wrote up a storyboard, which I usually do for most of my films, and the vision was there. So at that point, we had a plan for a movie, and it was a pretty decent plan. Well, yeah, even though it did take.
Now, I have a question.
Yes.
Now, I do have a question. Now, it's easy. I mean, in a sense, it's easy to disturb or make people feel uneasy with visuals. You know, gore, killing, jump scares. But I feel like it has to be a challenge to make people feel unease or disturbed psychologically or mentally.
It is a huge challenge. And knowing that, it was just kind of trying to figure out what would be a good balance between the two. Kind of like, I kept going back to films like Silence of the Lambs, which is very horrifying. Like, it's this disturbing story, but it's still like very concentrated in its characters, especially Clarice. And yeah, I'm also kind of, but on the offset, I was also thinking about films like After Sun, Charlotte Wells' After Sun, which has to explore like the themes of loss and grief, but kind of this film was going to be kind of a bridge between the two. Silence of the Lambs meets After Sun, which, yeah. Kind of a very unique thing, pretty hard to do. It was kind of difficult, but I mean, that idea did attract a good amount of people attached to the project eventually. Yeah, and when thinking about it and having like the solid script, I knew it was going to make it. It's just I was completely independent. I didn't have any real backing. I didn't have any studio attached to this. I had the bare minimum for resources. I didn't have a camera, but I knew I did want to attract like a good cast and crew for this project. Otherwise, like it wouldn't service the story well enough. It would just be like this thing. And luckily, now that the COVID restrictions were lifted, I knew that, yeah, I could like potentially put a little bit more effort in the project, but it was still going to be nice because everything was self-contained. Everything could still be shot in my house, more or less. And it was actually shot, I'd say like 80% of the film was shot in my house, which was nice because had like a certain amount of control. I knew I wanted to like get a good set of people behind the project. So I had contacted a friend of mine, Sky Murray. I shared with her the storyboard and the script. We had talked about making like a horror thriller film for a while. Had worked on this like theater project that didn't really go anywhere. But I knew this would be like a really good opportunity just to make something like really substantial. The rest of the crew was a little bit of a challenge to find, just because like I went to school at Hampshire College, which is in Amherst, Massachusetts, and basically coming out of that, all my contacts were like all over the country. But luckily enough, we were able to find like a really great set of people. Most of our crew we found through Chicago filmmakers Facebook groups, and I was surprised by the amount of turnout that like the project attracted, which kind of goes to serve if you've got like a solid premise for whatever work that you're doing, you can like really attract a good amount of interest like from the very offset. And then
especially in the Chicago market, there's a lot of talent, like indie talent in the Chicago market.
I know, and a lot of really good horror talent too.
Yes.
Like there's like a especially good substantial horror scene in Chicago. I'm not completely sure of the specifics, but we did find like an incredibly like fantastic group of people. I mean, from various walks of life. Our assistant director was going to DePaul at the time in his last year of college. Our cinematographer, actually, Fat Nguyen, he had never done a feature film or like a narrative film before. He was more based on music video shooting.
Wow.
Yeah. Our production manager, actually, I think this was his first time doing production management. He's an actor and has done like several shoots in around Chicago. I believe he did some assistant directing, but he's like very top notch. Um, and let's see. And yeah, our production designer, she originally reached out to us for assistant camera opportunity, I believe. But I mean, she had like a fantastic artist portfolio, so that just kind of played really well. And I believe she did do production design work to begin with. Um, but yeah,
Isn't it? I'm about to say, isn't it important to have that team behind you as a filmmaker? Because I see so many indie filmmakers, they want to do everything themselves. They want to wear all the hats, and I'm like, well, why would you want to do that?
I have no clue. I knew like I don't know. It's an issue with like directors, and I guess I myself can be a bit of a control freak myself. But like capturing every itty bit of information, almost like you're Stanley Kubrick. Um,
Yeah.
that's I don't know if it necessarily comes with the territory. It very well might, but it's just kind of like with a substantial production, you've got to loosen your control because like especially if you're completely independent, you're gonna have to do a lot of like dragging and hauling. That's definitely what was in the case for in the Flash. Just like my house, which isn't even my house. I actually live with my mother, so she owns the house. We had to like maintain everything, be sure nothing was like damaged. And for like a thriller film, I'm not going to give like a major spoiler. There's a little bit of gore in the film, but fake blood, it's not great with like walls and tiles and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So there was just like a lot of working we had to do with that. Um, I mean, we got it done. It did take, I want to say, well, pre-production took, I want to say, a solid 3 months. I had finished like yeah, I had finished the screenplay and the storyboard around April of 2023, and we started our crew calls and casting calls that May, and we really weren't ready to shoot anything until August. Yeah, crew took a good amount of time to find. Casting also was like it was an interesting feat in and of itself. We definitely wanted to find the right people. It's just especially with the characters like Jeremy and Ted, especially Jeremy. Their role conveys so much emotions, and it really goes into like some very heavy, dark stuff. I know you can even like see that through the trailer itself. Um, so we did spend a good amount of time on that. The actor we found to play Ted, I actually knew from a friend of a friend, Elsa Mard, Tanner Goldberg. They actually are, he's a comedic actor, surprisingly enough. His basis is in comedy. He did sketch comedy with Al. And I had seen a show they did back in like 2, 3 years ago in Chicago. And I knew like he could capture like intensity and fear very well while still kind of having the right cues for Ted's character. It's same thing for David's character too. Declan Shannon. He's more or less like more concentrated on comedy, which is like it was an interesting approach. Just because I don't know, horror and comedy kind of play hand to hand very well in some aspects.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are some funny parts in this film, like kind of in a very disturbing, darkly comedic way, but you can't really help but laugh at some points. Yeah, just letting you know. Finding Jeremy, the kidnapper, the antagonist, was that took a little bit more time. We were looking through several candidates through Backstage, actually. I think that's where we found like Declan as well. And then, like after I'd say like a solid month of searching, we found Chad. Chad, when looking at him, I had said we did. Here, let me show you. I made an extensive storyboard of the entire project. And the thing about me, I do like very intricate storyboards. I actually have a copy right here. Hopefully this doesn't. Yeah, hopefully this doesn't affect the focus of my camera. But this is Jeremy. And I had never met Chad before. I didn't even know he was an actor. When finding Chad, I knew immediately that he was going to be Jeremy. It did take a while for us to kind of fully have him understand the motivations behind the character, just because it's not your typical serial killer captor type role. It's just there's nothing really sinister about his motivations, like just in the way that, yes, he doesn't have very much apathy towards mostly anyone besides his dead brother, but he doesn't enjoy what he's doing, kind of in a way that Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men doesn't have like any joy for what he's doing. He's like compelled to perform these actions towards a certain goal or towards a certain morality. In a way, Jeremy has the same motivations. His motivations are kind of more concerned about his dealing with the loss of his dead brother and trying to make up for lost time. Trying to make up for his own mistakes, his own cowardice. Sorry. It's good enough. Yeah, I'm dealing with his.
Now, I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to selecting actors for particular roles, have you ever like wow, this person is the person I envision, this person fits the mold, and then you get them on set and it just doesn't work out?
I don't know if I.
Wow, I don't feel like they are the best. During the audition, they seem like the best fit, but you get them on an actual set, and it's not there.
I luckily enough haven't had that been in that circumstance, but I know what you're talking about. It's just kind of like you envision the character, but like for some reason, like the day is off or their understanding is off about the character. I would say I like to do a lot of pre-planning.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm kind of, it's just my brain's kind of wired that way. If I don't plan ahead. Something could go wrong, or the day gets drawn out. And like in college, when I was shooting my thesis film, things ended up being a little bit longer than intended, just in terms of like shooting days. But one thing that's always really important for me is for my actors to like internalize the character, like to understand what their motivations are, what they're going through, and like I usually value rehearsal space, rehearsal time. That's definitely what I did when like approaching Tanner and Shad, having them interact. Like beforehand, I did kind of like a one-on-one with them, just to see how good they would perform and whether if the emotions are going to gel, which they did. I think the more crucial planning had to do with blocking, just because we were kind of within a restricted space, just to be sure everything is like working out okay and the actions are making sense in the space and with the proxemics of the characters. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Now, listen. This was a long process to get this movie made, and what did it feel like when you finally finished this movie? Once it was completed, what was that feeling like?
I feel like, well, it's definitely been steps. Like, there are like different pieces of relief felt, especially like when we finished principal photography. That lasted for like a solid 8 days through a month stretch of time. And then what I didn't foresee exactly was the amount of time post-production was going to take. Just because, post-production ended up being a solid 9 months or so. Or like we started our full shooting late August. That was like 3 days of video camera shooting. That there are some parts of the movie, like the footage of David, that's shown throughout the film to instruct Ted. And then the 8 days of principal photography. The rest was just editing and also sound design as well. So I think sound design was like, for a thriller and a horror film, you really gotta get a solid basis of sound design, or else it's just not going to work out. It's not going to have the same effect. And this, it involved recording a lot of Foley, which I ended up doing myself. That probably wasn't the best idea, but we had limited resources anyway. And then also working with everything to like configure it in a Pro Tools session. That also took a long time, just because of like how I had my continuity formatted. I was working mostly in Final Cut, and if you've ever worked from Final Cut to Pro Tools, the workflow doesn't really exist. So that did take a little bit of time too, but we finally got like a fantastic job together. But yeah, it has like taken a good amount of toll. Showing the film, we had like a cast and crew screening, probably was the most like the best feeling of all, just cause everyone involved in the project finally had a chance to like fully see it like the method it was supposed to be seen. And it was
Yeah.
just, yeah, it was just such a good feeling, especially like having people fully understand the characters, understand the motivations. And like by the end, it really goes into some like deep emotional territory, and having that make an impact too. Um, sorry, I'm trying to do my best not to reveal spoilers.
Yeah.
Just
We don't-
and yourself too.
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but it does.
I'm
Oh, sorry. What were you going
sorry.
to say?
No, I'm gonna
Well,
say you've ran into a lot of obstacles while creating this film.
mhm.
I have a lot of viewers who watch this show, and they're thinking about making their first film, or they're in the process. What is the one big thing that really stood out to you that you were like, "Damn, I learned from this, and I would never make this mistake on any future projects."
Well, I think it has a lot to do with pre-planning, because even like with all the planning I did before this damn thing, I always ran into like so many different situations I just didn't oversee. Um, Gore. When dealing with gore, you really got to dedicate a full day with specifically involved with that. Um, like if you have a character that it has to be gored up for a certain scene, and you then decide to shoot a scene which happened previously when they have to look normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an issue, just because some of the fake blood did get into hair. We had to wash that out. Um, I was stupid enough to not foresee that, although, like, a lot of things kind of got, like, wrapped around. There are a lot of things that had to be accounted for, especially, like, when you're completely on your own, because you have to think about how you're going to feed your cast and crew. Most of our days were at least 8 hours a day, and it was like late afternoon towards the evening where most of the shoots were happening. So, like, you're dealing with people. People get tired. People need food. So you have to account for that. You have to account for your equipment as well. We were sourcing equipment through a few different companies. One production house in Chicago, another company. We were lending some lighting equipment. We also got some equipment from, let's see, borrowedlenses.com, which, like, that's a really cool resource for any first-time filmmakers, just because you can like order rented equipment, they ship it out to you, and you ship it back. And also our camera equipment, which came from Sky's father, who lives in Boston. So there are a lot of things that had to be accounted for. It's just kind of like, with everything that goes into even a short film production, there are like several factors that you can miss, especially the day of. And it's just kind of like, don't be afraid to get some extra eyes or get some extra help to do that. Because at the end of the day, many hands make lighter work. And this kind of goes back into like filmmakers trying to do everything themselves.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. And filmmaking, I mean, if you're like completely restricted, if you've got like, let's say, $1,000 budget and you want to make a feature film or something like that, or maybe not even that, maybe just like a couple bucks and an iPhone, you're like really restricted on what you can do. And but filmmaking really has a lot to do with input. input everyone can um, bring into the project. Because that's the nice thing too. If you've got like a project that's like a lot of people are interested in and have their like ideas, then it's just like living in a vacuum.
Yeah,
The best results usually come from outside of your head. Otherwise, the project doesn't live.
I agree. And you cannot be. I mean, this goes with anything. You can't be afraid of constructive criticism. Because
Yeah, exactly.
especially when it comes to your own project. I mean, even YouTube channel, whatever. Like you get so involved and wrapped in your own project that you do miss some things. You don't see some things, and somebody from the outside can point it out, and you're like, "Holy shit! How did I miss that? How did I not see that?"
Exactly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do get it because I do have that exact problem myself.
Yeah,
Um, but it's just kind of like it helps you force to become like a better filmmaker, a better director, um, and also something that's like I've kind of had to learn is like as a director, you got to learn how to be a producer too. Because if you don't think about what you need, then you run into like every issue under the sun.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just so cool working with this talented bunch of people, especially the actors, just and how much they brought into the table. Chad, the actor who played Jeremy, he is very attentive. He is like he really gets into the character. He really wants to know like what their motivations are, how like what they're thinking, what goes through their day to day, what their backstories are. I mean, to the point of not being method, which is like, uh, yeah, method acting is just not fun sometimes, or
Like
just
a
in the way of,
filmmaker, yeah.
well, yeah, or just kind of like still having that sense of break, break between you and the character. And like for Jeremy, it's a very haunted character, a very messed up, very. You don't want to be in that headspace for too long, or else
Yeah.
it's not healthy. But regardless,
Start
he
becoming
had,
you. Yeah.
yeah, he brought so much input in terms of like what would be the right way to achieve an action, the right way to kind of understand the character. That's like his own process. And I mean, of course, as a director, you got to tell, like, if an actor has like a completely wrong interpretation, you have to tell them like what's right, but also the reason why it's right without being
Yeah.
like too demanding. Otherwise, if you don't explain yourself, how is anyone going to understand what you're trying to show?
Your vision. Yeah.
Right, your vision and also the story. Like
Exactly.
if your story is worth remembering, it's worth watching, being engaged in, then it should speak for itself. You shouldn't like try to like completely push it without explaining why it works.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I mean, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's for the viewer, the person who's watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to have something so complex that the viewer who's watching it, is like, what the fuck's going on? I need to go and Google this to figure out what this means. Like, and
Mhm.
I've definitely seen a couple movies like that where, like, I don't know, it's just like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but and sometimes those are fun, but sometimes, I mean, they can be a buzzkill.
Right. No, no, I agree. Yeah, and also like if you aren't kind of trusting your crew, what's the point of having them?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, I knew from the offsets, I knew what kind of vision I had. It just, you've got to trust other people to get there,
Hmm.
but you also have to be like, yeah, you've got to have a good sense of leadership to get everyone in the right direction.
I agree.
I can definitely like attest for a cinematographer, Fat. Like he was such a big help with this. Like yeah, luckily enough, the storyboard did help us like figure out where everything needed to be, how everything was like. Um, Basically, everything was planned angle by angle with this within the space, but things did have to be changed. The way to achieve the visual look, I wasn't completely too sure how to do. Like, I mean, I do have a basis of cinematography. Not too well for color cinematography. Like, I do a lot of like still black and white shooting, but that's a completely different beast. Just because lighting is like critical to what you're doing. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, his direction in trying to achieve what look we were trying to get to, that was a big help. And I know with the look, we definitely wanted to go more. Uh, like I said before, it was kind of a meeting between Silence of the Lambs and Aftersun. Just having the thrilling aspects, dealing with like the creepiness of the setting, the eeriness of what's going on, but still being like very centered on the characters. We're also looking at films from like Denis Villeneuve, Bong Joon-ho, Polish director Krzysztof Kieslowski, just in terms of like his film's camera work. So I mean, we were like picking and choosing from a lot of different things at the end of the day to kind of get this final product together. But I think it did turn out like really, really well.
Well, Connor, I cannot wait to watch it and also give everyone my review in the next couple of
Thank
weeks. So
you.
definitely look out for that. Connor, where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find more information about the project on our Instagram page. That is Hard Rhyme Production. Yes, Hard Rhyme Productions. And if you're on Instagram, it's just at Hard Rhyme Productions. So that should be pretty easy to read, um, to find. If you want, I can even give you that handle. You can attach
Yep.
the video too.
I'm going to put that right in the description. So definitely get over to IG and follow. Connor, listen, this has been a pleasure. You can come on anytime, man. You're more than welcome.
Awesome.
And
So yeah, it's been so cool talking about this with you.
yes, yes. And listen, I can't wait to do the review. So definitely look out for that one. Everybody, look out for In the Flesh coming out sometime this year, hopefully early next year. But to definitely keep the eyes out for it. All right, well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and that's Connor Doyle. We'll see you next time. Take care. Connor,
Bye.